Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Local government is in crisis over Brexit. That's according to 30 internal impact studies which have been obtained exclusively by Sky News. They identify major concerns around infrastructure, land prices, funding and social care. Our political editor Faisal Islam is at the Sky News Centre with the details.
Thank you, Adam. In a major freedom of information project for Sky News Brexit Forensic, we've obtained a large number of Brexit impact studies conducted by local councils around the United Kingdom. It shows a picture of councils exasperated by central government and scrabbling to make Brexit contingency plans. We'll focus on 5 of them. You heard about Kent yesterday. Huge fears there about log-jammed traffic for 4 years if border checks are applied in Dover. But Dover is not the only port area in trouble. Let's take a look at Pembrokeshire. Take a look at this document, a risk register. 19 ways that they think Brexit will affect them. All but 1 listed as negative. 7 are in red, likely to have a high impact. And at the top there, the imposition of border controls and the, quote, ready availability of vital supplies, foodstuffs and medicines being investigated by this council's Department of Emergency Planning. There is one positive, we should say. People might move away, so there will be less demand on council services. Let's go to the Shetland Islands Council. They expressed concern about agricultural land prices. And this is the chart of the impact of different trading arrangements for types of farms across the Highlands and Islands. And it shows that under a no-deal World Trade Organization terms Brexit, 86% of sheep farms will be making a loss versus about half now. Bristol Council. They're warning of a different type of top-line threat, of social unrest or disillusionment during or after the negotiations, as neither Leave nor Remain voters feel their concerns are being met. Now, East Sussex Council was one of a number of councils expressing concerns about the Brexit impact on social care. There has already been a fall in the number of EU nationals taking jobs in the care sector, and the county council has great concerns that the end of freedom of movement will put further pressure on the sector that is already stretched. They put it all together, almost all the councils expressing huge concerns over actually how the Treasury will replace vital EU structural and regional funds, particularly now that any money has been promised to the NHS. But the biggest common feature, exasperation, that they just do not know what to plan as they await the government, a government that is yet to publish its own impact and preparedness studies. Adam.
Yes, Faisal, and as we know, well over half of the funding for local government comes directly from central government. Do we have any idea whether central government has even looked at these assessments from local councils and when it's going to produce, or whether it will produce, its own version of this analysis?
Short answer, no. Obviously, they're focused on what the big deal will be, trying to do that big deal. We've seen Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, flying around European capitals. I mean, this is what we've got so far, and this is just from 30 councils, and it is quite instructive that central government, as yet, has not published any preparedness notices that we thought might be coming. That's where some of the stories about stockpiling came in the past couple of weeks. And yet it is just 8 months till a potentially significant change in the way in which our trading environment operates. And it's worth noting the European Union itself has published nearly 6 dozen preparedness notices for what might change in March. So some catching up to do pretty soon. It looks like local government taking some of these matters into their own hand, and that's revealed by Sky News using freedom of information. Adam.
Thank you very much indeed, Faisal. Well, let's get some reaction to that from two councillors. David Simmons, who's Deputy Chairman of the Local Government Association, and joining us from Leeds is Matthew Robinson, a Conservative councillor on Leeds City Council. Welcome to you both. First of all, Mr Simmons, do you think that's a fair assessment of the concern across the country from local government?
Well, councils are leading on this because our residents and our local businesses expect us to be prepared. People need to know, for example, if they're EU citizens, whether they'll have the right to vote and stand in the local elections that are due to take place next year. People who are importing goods and exporting goods through the ports, where councils, including my own in Hillingdon, the Port Authority, need to know what charges they might have to pay and how long they might have to wait, especially when those things are live animals or fresh food. So we need the answers to those questions. And what
and
the
you
documents,
don't have them.
We don't. And what the documents you've just outlined are those councils saying, what are the possible options? How can we prepare for those? So if, for example, Kent County Council needs to arrange to get Meals on Wheels to vulnerable elderly people, what's the impact of having the M20 closed and what might they do to get around that problem?
Now, those are all questions, but does local government feel that Brexit is bad news for local councils, however it happens?
Well, whichever side you're on the debate, this is about preparing for the practical implications. And what you've just heard is that many of those practical implications are bad news. We know if there are going to be queues of lorries stuck on the motorways, if there's going to be food rotting on the tarmac, we need to take steps to prevent that from happening so that those local services that people depend upon keep running. And just as councils do this, if we think there's going to be bad weather, we grit the roads, we make preparations for that. If we know there's going to be large numbers of refugees arriving in our country, we prepare for that. We're preparing for what the practical implications of a Brexit process may be.
Councillor Robinson, do you agree that Brexit does pose practical difficulties for Leeds?
I think what it is, it's about having the time to prepare, and if there is adequate time, then any council can prepare for those circumstances. At the moment in Leeds, I sit on a Brexit working group, and I was calling for preparations immediately after the vote. And unfortunately, Leeds City Council and other councils failed to do that and actually kicked the ball over to central government and said, well, you get on with it, we'll wait to be told what to do. Well, unfortunately, that actually doesn't help the council, and there's very practical things they can be doing in terms of making sure they're speaking with EU citizens who are here, making sure that they're actually advertising what has been agreed. And at the moment, councils don't seem to be doing that, including Leeds.
Councillor Robinson, though, we are 9 months away. Do we have the time to do it between now and March the 29th?
I think there is still time to do that at the moment. The worry will be when we get to a cliff edge situation. Now, I don't think that anybody will let that happen, actually. I think that regardless of whether there is a deal or no deal, there'll be an adequate transition that comes in and interim arrangements. But what business is telling me and what actually other councillors are telling me is they just need the time to be able to prepare for things. And at the moment, it is absolutely right that councils start to take some of these matters into their own hands and think ahead and try and manage their own destiny as well.
What about resources, Councillor Simmons? Because we've got the news today from Northamptonshire, for example, that just a couple of months into the new financial year, they've already gone to an emergency footing of only providing basic services. Are councils getting the money they need?
Well, councils are facing a pretty tough challenge. We've seen the rising costs of social care in particular, putting a strain on finances. But Councillor Robinson's absolutely right. What businesses, what residents want is time, but also certainty. And one of the challenges at the moment on the questions like, will EU citizens have the right to vote in next year's local elections? So does the council need to put them on the electoral roll or not, is that that's not an agreed position. It's currently being negotiated with the EU. So those British people who are serving as councillors, who are voting in other EU countries, and their counterparts in the UK, don't know where they stand. So when those people are coming through the door and saying to the local authority, just tell me what I need to do. Do I need to register? Do I need to make an application? We need to be in a position to give them good answers. So we've got a good relationship with government. James Brokenshire, the Secretary of State, has been working very closely with the LGA, and we're beginning to get to the situation now where we can answer those questions for our residents and businesses.
Councillor Robinson, what about those questions of citizens' rights? There was a view that they had been resolved, but it now appears it's all up in the air again.
Well, I think that we were moving towards certainty on citizens' rights, and that's for EU citizens in this country and British citizens in the EU too. I actually expect that we'll go back to that position and make sure that, I don't think that the EU wants to start kicking out British citizens and the British government wants to start making life harder for EU citizens in this country because they're so entwined. But actually what we need to do is make sure that the position is clear for them. And with 9 months to go, there's still lots of time to do that. But the worry is if you leave it, as Councillor Simmons said, to a month before, that's when there isn't a lot of time to make sure that you establish citizens' rights and you're very clear with people. And it's the clarity and the certainty that people require. At this moment in time, I'm not worried, and I wouldn't expect many people in this country would be worried about that because we still have time. The worry will be when it gets to a cliff edge.
Well, we're going to hear from them shortly. You were someone who supported leave in the referendum. Looking at the practical difficulties now, Councillor Robinson, would you still vote? And if so, why vote to leave?
I'd still vote to leave if there was another vote tomorrow. And I think it's important that we actually have the opportunity to make our own trade deals and manage our own borders and manage our own laws. And that wouldn't change whether there was a vote tomorrow, in 6 months' time or in 2 years' time. So for me, nothing has changed. I think that we're going into this as a negotiation and trying to be open-minded. And I hope that the other side, the European Union side, are going in trying to be open-minded as well, because we want to try and be good neighbours with each other. And we are not leaving Europe, we are leaving the European Union. And there is a massive difference in that. People should know that.
OK, Councillor Simmons, do you see any gains from Brexit, potential gains?
Well, the clock is ticking, and clearly, as Faisal said in his report, a reduction in the number of people in some parts of the country might be welcomed by those councils because it will reduce the burden on things like housing. And certainly EU procurement rules are quite a burden for local authorities. But there are many challenges that are practical ones, like recruiting the social care staff that we need and simply managing the responsibilities that councils have at our ports of entry, where we need certainty soon.
OK, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.